Hey guys, it's Miss Hill's first grade class. I know we haven't seen each other in a long time. We got a longer break than we first thought we did, but I wanted to let you guys know that I miss you and I can't wait to see you guys again. This week is our spring break, so you guys are playing at home, hopefully still reading books and playing outside with your family. Today I was going to read you a story. Like I said, next week we'll start learning from the computer or from your phone, but today I was going to read you a story. The story I'm going to read today is the story Honey, the Dog Who Saved Abe Lincoln. Written by Sherry Swanson, illustrated by Chuck Groening. I know you guys should remember who an illustrator is. An illustrator is the one that drew the pictures. The writer or the author is the one that wrote the words. Young Abraham Lincoln was kneeling deep in the woods when 3 shrill blasts of a whistle cut through the quiet. His corn was ready at the mill and he was late. Watching a frog limp away in the brush, Abe smiled. It wasn't every day he was able to rescue a frog right out of a snake's mouth. Abe hurried back to where Mr. John Hodgen, the miller, was waiting. "Now, Abe, what took you so long this time?" Mr. John asked. "I just can't move along fast like some boys, Mr. John, because I see so many little foolish things that make me stop. I can't help it to save my life." Mr. John patted the boy's head and handed him a sack of ground corn. "Now get on your way, Abe. You'd best be home before dark." Abe heaved the bag onto his shoulder and set off on the long path and wound its way like a rusty snake through the Knob Creek hills to the Lincolns' log cabin. Abe had only a mile or so left to go when something caught his attention. He froze. What was rustling in the bushes? Beneath some branches at the base of a cliff, Abe found a dog whimpering softly. The dog's front legs was broken. "Did you fall, boy?" Abe asked. The dog looked up into Abe's eyes, wagging his tail. Abe patted the gentle dog's head and looked around for something to use to set the leg. He was only 7 years old, but Abe had spent his whole life on a Kentucky farm and knew how to tend to animals. He pared 2 sticks smooth with his pocket knife to make a splint. Then he peeled the soft bark of a pawpaw bush to wrap around the sticks. Finally, he tied it all around the dog's legs with some rawhide from his belt. By the time Abe was through, the sun was slanting low through the trees. Abe hefted the bag of ground corn back onto his shoulder and he called to the dog. The dog struggled up and limped along after Abe on his 3 good legs. Abe was going to be late. That wasn't unusual, but this time he had a dog with him to explain. "Would your parents like you to bring home a dog?" Abe's father was asleep by the fire when Abe got home, but his mother was waiting up. "Oh, Abraham, where have you been off to this time? Didn't you know I would be worried?" "I found a real honey of a dog. His leg is broken," Abe whispered. "Please let me keep him." Abe looked up at his mother. "He'll do lots of good things for me," he told her. "You just watch and see." Nancy could never say no to that beloved boy, so the dog stayed. Abe snuck Honey scraps of food, and soon the dog was able to walk. Honey's leg looked like a curve in the road, but that didn't stop him from trotting along after Abe on their adventures. Everywhere Abraham went, Honey went. One day, Abe showed up late to drop off his grain at the mill. Mr. John shook his head. "Why do you fool your time away?" he asked Abe. "You have seen these hills and hollows hundreds of times. I can't understand what you find to keep you so long on the road." "Well, Mr. John," Abe answered, "Honey got a possum in a hollow stump, and I couldn't get him to leave it, and I couldn't leave Honey." Abe wandered off a bit to wait his turn. He took out a soapstone pencil to practice writing his letters on a bit of bark. But soon the woods were calling and Abe got the itch to answer. Before long, he and Honey found themselves at the mouth of a cave. Deep, twisting caverns traveled for hundreds of miles under Kentucky. A boy and his dog could get lost in caverns like these, and sure enough, disaster struck. Abe got jammed between two boulders and he couldn't move. Try as he might, pulling himself this way, that way, and back again, he was hopelessly stuck and night was beginning to fall. Honey whimpered and pawed at the ground. Abe couldn't move. Honey normally never left Abe, but this time he headed alone back into the darkening woods. Honey would need to go get help. Back at the mill, the entire town had gathered into the night to search for Abe. Mr. John had been blowing and blowing on his whistle, but Abe hadn't came home. Nancy Lincoln asked for Mr. John. "Have you seen the dog, Mr. Hodgin? Was Honey with Abraham when he came to the mill?" "Yes, the dog was with him," answered Mr. John. Abe's mother was grateful for Honey. It comforted her to know he had him for protection. She waited anxiously at the edge of the dark forest, hoping the boy would come home. Then she heard something rustling in the bushes. "Here's Honey," she called. Suddenly, Honey emerged from the bushes, barking and whining at Nancy's feet. The dog looked up in the faces of one after another until he got to Mr. John. Then Honey jumped up on Mr. John and barked in his face. "Grab your torches," called Mr. John. "We'll follow where the dog leads." So they knew the dog knew where Abe was. Yelping and panting, Honey headed back through the woods. The townsfolk followed behind him, their torches parting the night. That means their torches were lighting up the night sky. When they got to the cave entrance, Honey stopped. The townsfolk were afraid. Many a silent prayer went up for the boy's safety. Mr. John blew 3 times on his cane pole whistle. They're all looking in the cave. "Here I am," called Abe, his voice echoing from deep within the cavern. "But I'm fastened." Mr. John carefully made his way in the damp, narrow tunnel. He found Abraham wedged tightly, but had no room to swing a sledge to break the rocks. Mr. John could only tug Abe out, even though it meant leaving some of the boys hide behind. So that means he kind of scraped Abe when he pulled him out. Once Abe was back up into the night sky, Nancy rushed to hold her beloved son and his precious dog. Abraham was surprised at the crowd. He smiled at his mother. "I knew Honey would do great things for me," he said. "Now he has paid me back for mending his broken leg." So he helped the dog, and now the dog helped him. The next day, and for many more days after that, Abe and Honey were back to their adventures, bumping and scrambling their way along the banks of Knob Creek. A boy and his loyal dog, Honey. The end. So at the end of the story, sometimes it gives you a little more information. So at the end of this story, it tells us a timeline of Abraham Lincoln. So this story was actually based on the truth. It was not exactly like it said, because there's not enough information to say this is all facts, but this story has been told for generations after generations. So we know that this story is kind of true. Okay guys, well I hope you had a good time listening to Miss Hill read, and I hope you guys are reading at home too. And again, I'll send more videos of me reading, and then next week I'll send some assignments. That means some work to do at home, okay? So I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.